So hello, everyone. We are delighted to be joined today by Dr. Karen Simasco and Dr. Tracy Ann Perry. They're going to be introducing themselves. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to them now.
Great, thank you, Jaya. Let's see, we're going to get this going. We've got another. Great, so good afternoon, everyone. As Jaya said, I'm Karen Simasco. I have been here at Merz Aesthetics for 5 years. But what I wanted to start out with today is showing you the journey that science has taken me on and how I ended up in Raleigh, North Carolina at Merz. And my understanding is the people joining the call are from the Virginia, Maryland, DC area. I grew up in Southern Maryland, in Lexington Park, Maryland, in a very small town. And one thing that I enjoyed in high school, along with science, was music. And I chose a college based on being able to be in the marching band. And I went to St. Mary's in Notre Dame, and was able to participate in the University of Notre Dame marching band, basketball band, and concert band. So I will start out by saying, as you're journeying through life, always make sure that you have a good balance and that you incorporate things that you love in work and outside of work. So I moved from Maryland to South Bend, Indiana, and I majored in biology and minored in chemistry. So some of the courses that I took included ecology as well as immunology. And I was really torn which way to go, whether I was going to do ecology or immunology. And I had the opportunity to do my senior thesis at the University of Notre Dame Environmental Research Center in Wisconsin. And when they came to me with this opportunity, I said, look, I'm going to go into immunology. I've made that decision, but they said, go and do the research. You will learn how to think. It will help you get into graduate school. And so I spent a summer in high waiter boots in lakes, identifying niches to genus and species. So one message that I would say to everybody is take every, or at least consider every opportunity that comes your way, because it can open so many different doors that you may have never thought about. And like I said, I did go to the Environmental Research Center, and it was the first time where I did a research project that was completely independent. We had to figure out the protocol, we had to do it all. So it was a great, great learning experience. While at college, a speaker came from Rush University, one of the professors, and he was extremely enthusiastic about immunology. And I left that classroom that day, and I had made the decision that I was going to go to Rush University and do a PhD in immunology. And my research was looking at the effects of a drug that transplant patients were taking called leflutamide and how it was acting on different immune cells. So I did a lot of microscope work, spent a lot of time in the lab with test tubes and the white coat. I then did a postdoc at the University of Chicago and spent 5 years there. And from there, for the first time in my life, left academics and went to work for a pharmaceutical company in Irvine, California. And this was all in the lab again for 10 years, looking at the immune-mediated mechanisms for an eye condition called dry eye. And after 10 years, I moved to Dallas for this particular company and went into medical affairs. And I have been in medical affairs since. So I started as a medical science liaison. I left the lab and went out into the field and talked to retina surgeons about science. So I covered 13 states, was traveling the majority of the time, had the opportunity to travel all over the world to different congresses and represent the company to talk about the science. So it's a very exciting time. From there, I was offered a medical director position in San Francisco. So I moved to San Francisco for 2 years And then, as I said, I've been at Merz for 5 years now. So I've been a little bit all over the country and have loved every step of the journey.
Okay, so answer me this. How do you go from wearing thigh-high wader boots in environmental science to being in medical aesthetics?
Well, it's a great question. And I go back to what I said earlier, is you take every opportunity that people give you. So I have on my path, we see the picture of the eye, and I had been in ophthalmology for 13 years at that point in my career. And there was a mentor of mine, I still consider her a mentor, that I had worked with at this particular company that went to a startup company. And she called me one day and said, I have an opportunity for you. And it was in the aesthetic space. And I spent a lot of time thinking about making that decision. But I did make the decision to go into aesthetics. And it was really very, very eye-opening. I had spent 13 years waking up every morning hoping that I could help somebody see better, to moving into a field where I hope that I can make somebody look better. But when you look better, you feel better.
Yep.
And you live better. So that's how my journey got there. And then I did go back into ophthalmology for 2 years, but I had the opportunity to come to Merz and work in the aesthetic space again, and I love it.
And now we get to work together.
That's right, yeah.
Lovely.
So I will turn it over to you.
Oh, yes. So I shamelessly copied Karen's strategy of my journey with science and where it began. And you may hear from my accent that I'm English. My name's Tracy Ann Perry, and I'm the Vice President of our Global Clinical Research and Development Group here at Merz. Karen and I work very closely together. Where I started was at the University of Liverpool in the UK, doing a degree in microbiology. From there, I went to Cambridge and switched fields. So still science, it was actually neuroscience, microbiology and growing bugs and disease, and the smell of agar and bugs on agar plates was not really filling me with joy. And I started to work on models of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. I found my passion. I loved that as a science. And from there went down to London to do a PhD actually at the Institute of Psychiatry, which is the oldest psychiatric hospital in Europe, which is now part of King's College London. I was working on models of Alzheimer's disease, and from there packed 2 suitcases, and this is where we need some help with my animation here. I took off on a plane to come to the United States, where my adventure began in a lot of years ago, 20 years ago. And I took a postdoctoral position actually on your doorstep. It was at the National Institute of Aging at the Johns Hopkins campus in Baltimore. It was a wonderful 5 years. I was working on drug therapeutics for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease and head trauma, and probably would have stayed, but as happens when you're not American, my visa needed to change, and I wanted to stay in the United States. It was a wonderful adventure. I was learning a huge amount. And I took a job on the West Coast and moved to California, working similarly on drug therapeutics, both actually for Parkinson's disease, but also switching a little bit to work on models of diabetes. It's a challenging industry. It takes an awful long time to develop a drug, and part of my desire was to broaden what I was doing a little bit, and being in sort of the non-clinical space in the drug development world, I felt like I could do more, and I wanted a different opportunity. And I had a chance to work for a company you may have heard of, Allergan, in Santa Barbara, and I switched fields slightly to working on medical device. So starting out working in drug therapeutics and then switching to medical device, which is quite a big transition, and it's a very different field, taught me an enormous amount. I moved closer back down to San Diego with Allergan, and primarily working at this point in the medical device space. I had transitioned to medical aesthetics, primarily in breast aesthetics. So I was working on soft tissue reinforcement and tissue expanders and breast implants, primarily aimed at ladies who have had mastectomies. I think probably everyone on the call today has somebody that they know or somebody in their family that has had breast cancer. And it became a passion for me working in that space. Very different, obviously, to drug therapeutics, but equally as rewarding. And after 10 plus years working in plastic surgery, I had the opportunity also to come to Merz, switching a little bit to more facial and body than breast. But you know, the same type of industry, the same type of studies. And now I get to live in Raleigh, North Carolina, not too far from where I first came to the United States. And I have been with Merz for 2 years.
Can you comment, so you've had the opportunity to work in Europe as well as in the United States. Are there differences doing science in the different global locations?
Well, that's a good question. The science is science, approvals are approvals. Patient safety is patient safety. So in that respect, it's the same everywhere. Different countries have different approval requirements. But how we set a study up and how we generate the data that's going to support a new product is the same throughout the world. Little nuances here and there, but essentially making sure that we develop a product that is the safest, best product that we can develop for our patients, the better. That's what we do. Okay, so, and I'm not sure how much everybody on the call understands about medical aesthetics or understands about R&D. So what Karen and I have is something that's very focused on research and development in terms of us as an organization here at Merz. But the bottom line is, in my world and in Karen's world, essentially R&D is this innovative hub. We are fortunate enough to have a lot of outside of the box thinkers. We have very talented scientists and engineers who all work together to develop new or build on existing medicinal products and medical devices. So there is, I think what we want to try to help you realize today is that there is a role for every single one of you who's interested in STEM, whether you're a mathematician or whether you're a biologist or whether you're an environmentalist or whether you're an engineer. What I hope to show you is that on our teams, there's a role for you.
And let's talk about that a little bit, because I was going to share with everyone and I'm on the medical affairs side. On the strategic research team, there are 7 of us. I have a full-time biostatistician. I have a nurse. I have a PharmD with an MBA.
Oh, wow.
And 2 PhDs and a plastic surgeon. So a complete range, and everybody brings great expertise and something different to the table. So I know with your team, is there that range and that
huge range of people we have? And I want it to be clear that Karen and I both have PhDs. Karen has, and I have on my team, physicians. I have people on my team who don't have a 4-year degree. You can there is a role for everyone. We have folks who work in contracts. We have folks who, you know what I really need? We need social media help.
Yes,
In
we do.
recruiting. We do, in terms of recruiting patients into our clinical studies. Sometimes we have, and I have it on a later slide, but we have sometimes problems finding the right type of folks, and we have to help our doctors. And none of us are really good at social media. So I hope that we can help you see that there's a role for everyone, and regardless of whether you are a physician, a postdoctoral fellow, whether you have a master's or a 4-year degree, or you have a high school diploma, or you are just simply excited about science, there is a role for you within this industry.
We have somebody in medical affairs that is certified in planning events, and
Yes,
we do so many events. And they are fantastic at what they do, and getting 50 people into one spot and
Yes.
all of everything that has to be organized, they're critical, business critical. We're bringing in doctors, we're entertaining customers, and it has to be on point. So as Tracy Ann has said, there's a whole range of things that you may not have even been aware of that occur in a pharmaceutical company in terms of career positions.
So, okay, all right. So now we're gonna start blinding you with science now. Now this slide I shamelessly stole from Google, so don't sue me or anything terrible. Where does clinical fit? This is a schematic. Do not get into the details of this, but I couldn't manage to find anything else that worked better. I want to show you here that clinical is that box in the middle of the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. This is traditional pharmaceutical drug development. What we have coming in from the left is the idea. So we have an interaction there with our non-clinical folks. These are the folks who are the geniuses of the drug and the device world. These are the folks who are creating the new product concepts. Once we have a new product concept and there's been some preliminary evaluation, perhaps an in vitro and in vivo data, we've identified what our drug target is, our new candidate, then we start formulating and analoging and making sure that we've got something that's going to last a long time, that we understand what the chemistry of it is. And at that point, it becomes sort of an iterative process. We start thinking about what are we going to do with this drug or this medical device, and how are we going to show the agency? And by agency, I mean the FDA. They're on your doorstep. In America, it's the FDA. How are we going to show the world that this product is safe? How are we going to test it in people? And that's fundamentally what my group does, is the different phases of the clinical study, generating data to show that, number one, the product works, and number two, that it's safe. And that sounds very simple. And for a drug study, it's really not that simple. We go through various phases where you start slowly and you build up. Karen has a slide, a really good slide later on, showing how many people you have at each step. But ultimately, we generate those studies. We pull like you submit the package of information, and then people that are way smarter than us review that information, and they identify, is there enough information here for it to be approved for use in patients in the United States? And that's what we call the approval process. So it makes it sound like a very seamless transition, which is definitely not. But it's a very cross-functional paradigm. It involves all aspects of science, as we were mentioning earlier. If we look a little bit more into, and this is where I get very excited because we start talking about what does a clinical trial look like. Oh, where do I even start? So what my team does is we design and we execute on the clinical study. We take the thing and we test it in people. So we design the study, but one of the most important things of designing that study is thinking about how are you going to show that it works? What is your clinical outcome assessment? And the agency, that the FDA is now beautifully saying, it's not just a drug and an effect. We can take a blood sample and we can tell if the drug's there. It's how is the patient involved and what does the patient feel? So those patient-focused assessments are critically important. We can make something work, but if the patient doesn't care, we don't have a product. So it's a combination of assessments, tools that we use that are clinician assessments. So the doctor is assessing whether or not that drug is working. Sometimes it's an observer outcome. So it's let's think about this. Somebody who has Alzheimer's disease, right? You have a grandparent, they're dementing. They have a caregiver. We can often use tools to ask the caregiver to identify if the drug that we're giving is improving an outcome, improving cognition. Can they remember better? A patient-reported outcome is the patient themselves. For our products, does my skin look smoother? Is my skin more hydrated? That's patient-reported outcome. And then we have performance outcomes as well. So this can get very, very, very complicated. Once we've got our trial, we've identified what our outcome assessment is. That's what we call our development, our clinical development. Then we get into the meat of the operation, which is how do we conduct the study? So this is a process by which we plan the study, we develop protocols, you write your methods, you identify where are you going to do this study? It's not like you do it in the office. You have to find doctors, you have to find sites, the doctors have to find patients, and then we have to actually execute the study. We have to track the patients coming in. And then the biostatisticians work magic with the data. And there's a long process of analyzing and reporting, and then the study closes out. So all of this can take a very long time and a large, large number of people. So I think you might be interested in clinical R&D. What do you want to, I used to ask myself the question, what do I want to be when I grow up? And I knew that I wanted to be a scientist, but I didn't know what kind of scientist I needed to be, or even what jobs there were available. And so it was, for me, I know it was very challenging when I finished high school and I was trying to pick, like, oh, what am I going to do? I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what options there are. I need somebody to write options down for me. And so this slide here really is just an example, I think, of the different types of roles that we have that are all science engineering type roles that all play a critical part in our fields, that any one of which, if one of these is missing, our whole paradigm of developing our products falls down. If we don't have clinical monitors, or we don't have medical writers, or we don't have statisticians and people who are great at crunching numbers, everything falls down, and we have problems.
And then once you have the information, you have to be able to communicate it.
Absolutely, you have to be able to communicate it. Great segue. Great segue. So in between, transitioning really to what Karen is talking about, and I hope it's clear how much I love what I do and Karen loves what she does. for me, the most important thing is do what you love, because I hope that we're managing to show you that your passion, what aspect, what area of science you love, there is a role for you. And yes, there is a role for you.
Yeah. And I encourage everyone on the phone, even being on this call today, the more you can be exposed to the different opportunities, the more it will help you make a decision in which way you want to take your career and your life. So thank you, Tracy Ann, for that. I follow Tracy Ann because we work very closely, and you'll see how we help each other accomplish our goals for the year. So I serve as the Associate Vice President for Strategic Research, and I'm in the Global Medical Affairs Department. And one thing, as I had given you my journey, another important part of life to me is seeing the world. And I wanted to emphasize that science has taken me all over the world. I've been in congresses and meetings in Korea, in Singapore, India. I've been through most of Europe. I've been to Africa, Brazil, Argentina, and I put here a private trip that I did being a biologist, is that I had always wanted to go to the Galapagos Islands. And prior to starting at Merz, I went to the Galapagos Island and was able to go to the Charles Darwin Research Center, really the father of biology. It was a bucket list for me and very important, but the take-home message here is science has really opened up the world for me in many, many ways. And I'm sure it's done the same for you as well.
I came to America and I never went home.
So getting into actually what I do, so Tracy Ann shared with you what we call phase 1, 2, and 3. That's a drug comes in to be tested. Tracy Ann's groups run it through the clinical trials, and once it's FDA approved, it goes out into the market. And I'm sure many of you have taken a prescription drug, and when you open up that box, there's a huge piece of white paper that has a lot of writing on it. We call that on label. And all of these clinical trials are done with what we call very strong inclusion and exclusion criteria, because we want to see the effect of the drug without any confounding items. But when the drug goes out in the real world, you have patients that have diabetes, you have patients that have heart conditions, you have patients that have different conditions that are excluded from the phase 1, 2, and 3. So part of medical affairs is gathering what we call real world evidence. How does the drug work in the actual clinic? And that can be very beneficial for the clinicians, for the patients, and for the company. Because once the product goes out on the market, we have physicians come back to us and say, hey, we know it's not what you tested it for, but we're finding that it works very well. And so part of the responsibility of strategic research is to evaluate some of these concepts that they bring to us, and we set up a strategy, we align it with our business needs and the unmet needs, and the doctors can submit to look at some of these concepts, and we call those investigator-initiated trials. So that's one aspect that we look at. But what I'm trying to do here is outline a number of the responsibilities that medical affairs covers. So outside of phase 1, 2, and 3, we do phase 4, clinical research. We have people out in the field, we call them medical science liaisons. They go out and talk to the physicians. They find out how the product is working in the real world. What are the data gaps? What do we need to fill? What did the original clinical trials not answer for them? We're responsible for medical education. So we do this through preparing materials, having symposiums at congresses. We have online information that's available to provide education around the mechanism of action of our products and the science behind the products.
To who? Who are we educating?
So for Merz and for aesthetics, we are educating from plastic surgeons, to dermatologists, to nurses that are injecting the fillers and the botulinum toxins. And then also they can go out and teach for all of the office staff. So sometimes it's nice for the office staff to have the background on the products so that they can educate patients. We develop thought leader relationships. So we have what we call key opinion leaders, and we develop relationships through advisory boards, through relationship management to stay on top of, again, what's happening in the real world. What do we need to be aware of? And then we have medical information. So a lot of times doctors have unsolicited questions that they need addressed. So they will be sent into medical information, and we have a team that sends out scientific answers to address any questions. So this is a 35,000 foot view of medical affairs. But it goes to show, and I talked about real world evidence. So on the right side on the left side, the randomized controlled trials is what Tracy Ann talked about. As I said, very strict inclusion and exclusion criteria. Whereas with real world evidence, we can continue to get information on diverse patient populations. We have usually in the real world evidence, we have very limited exclusion criteria because we want to just see how are our products working in the real world environment. And like I said, the physicians come to us. We evaluate concepts for investigator-initiated trials. If we decide to approve them, we provide funding, but then we're hands-off. So this is really coming not from the perspective of the company, but from the perspective of the actual clinician treating the patient in the clinical office. And this can help, and where this Tracy Ann and I start to come is, this leads to, are there potential new indications that the company should go after? And what should those endpoints be in the clinical trials? So it helps a lot with what we call life cycle management. So I'm going to end with Tracy Ann said, do what you love. And this is what I love. I remember I was in the lab in my postdoc and I was doing electron microscopy, and you sit in this dark room and you've got a big screen and you've got the cell on the slide, and you can see it was like literally walking through the inside of the cell. You could see the mitochondria. It was just like, it was like being one with the cell. So I like to think about immune cells. I like to think about receptors on the cells. I like to think about the proteins that the cells secrete and how it affects other parts of the body. So this is what I get excited about. And I'm not saying that everybody on the call should be excited about this, but find your passion. Find what makes you smile and happy every day.
We're all geeky scientists at heart.
So we'll end there and open it up if there's any questions.
Where's the get the pictures back?
So I see that Anna has a question, and I also have a few burning questions for both of you. So I'll start with saying thank you for that absolutely fascinating talk, and then maybe Anna can ask her question, and I'll control myself a bit longer.
We're trying to get your pictures back up on the screen.
Yeah.
The Zoom, maybe go to the Zoom.
I think there's a way to do stop sharing.
I'm sorry. We're trying to get back to
We're
the
trying to
Zoom.
get back to the Zoom. We can hear. Oh, there we are. We're back. All right.
Well, yes, thank you very much. That was really interesting. I had a question in the middle of it, but let me backtrack, because I think that it's really interesting to hear how your journeys and how you got here. And one of the things that you were saying is find your passion. And scientists, and I'm an engineer, but you know, in STEM, there's you know, the idea of being a nerd, and we are, you know, always
We're all nerds. It's okay.
Embrace it.
Yes.
But it sounds like these jobs are really very social. I mean, they're team focused.
Yes.
Very much so. I was wondering if you could talk, you were talking about how, the teams themselves, and all the different roles that you have in the teams. If you could talk a little bit more about maybe the size of the teams, and if you have teams working on only one of the products, or are they cross product focused, just again, to give some idea.
Yeah, sure.
So I've got to jump on that session because there's something that we call soft skills, which is so important for
Yes.
meeting with physicians. One thing that I've learned in my career is listening is so important. You can learn so much sitting with a physician and just listening. But to your point, it is very social because these physicians are in clinic all day. A lot of them are in surgery all week. And when you go to the congresses, they want to talk. They want you to bring them value. They want you to, they want to have these interactions outside of clinic. This is their time to learn. So you do have to have those soft skills, listening. But to your original question, I think it was how many people and do they work on different products? So I'll give you an example. So I have my biostatistician works on the whole portfolio. I have a medical director entirely devoted to botulinum toxin. I have a medical director completely devoted to fillers and energy-based devices. I mentioned that I have a nurse on the team. She definitely covers the entire portfolio. She's been with the company for 15 years. I can't think of an individual in the company that has more expertise than this individual. So there are members for, at least on the medical affairs side, that are very product devoted, but I also have members that are portfolio expertise. I'll let you comment.
Yeah, I think that's the same for us. So we have 4 franchises. So we have toxin, we have energy-based devices and fillers. And it's interesting because when I came on board, I have about 40 people, 38 people, and they're split between, mainly between Raleigh and our office in Frankfurt, Germany. And there's folks from Germany and Raleigh on teams. When I came here, I wanted everybody to be very cross-functional. So we did so less working on one particular product and more working on many different types of products because it's experience. You get experience of energy-based device versus toxin. But it's interesting that when folks find their passion, like I have folks that just want to work on toxin and that's their choice. And if they choose to do that, I'm happy, completely happy for them to do that. So we have multiple projects on that particular product. So if they desire to just stay in that one area, they become that subject matter expert. But if they want to work on multiple different products, then they can. The opportunity is there for them to do that. So I think does that answer the question? I think so.
Yes, that's great.
And I think in the chat, was there a question about the length of trials?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
So the length of time for clinical trials in the aesthetic space, well, so that depends whether it's a device or whether it's a drug. So if we're talking about toxin and we're talking about more of a drug, then it can take from start to finish, it can take 15 years. A new drug is about 15 years, which was the reason that I decided to move away from the pharmaceutical space and move more towards medical device, because it's much faster, depends on the device, but effectively you could go from concept to approval in 5 years, maybe. But it depends what the product is. But I wanted to be able to understand and see that entire product development process. And I knew that I probably wouldn't get to see as much as I wanted if I stayed in the drug space. So that was my personal decision and my choice. So,
Makes sense.
yeah.
So I'm gonna jump in with my question. So I was really fascinated. Both of you talked about your winding careers, which was fascinating, winding path
Very.
to your careers. But I was even more struck by the similarities in them. So both of you actually talked about, grasping the opportunities that come by in your life and being open to those. And then both of you talked about, changing your careers and changing your focus according to whatever these opportunities were, even though they were like across different countries and everything. So I was curious about what are your approaches to and also you talked about soft skills a couple of minutes ago. And so what are your approaches to when you have a career change or you find that passion and you're like, okay, this is what I want to do with my life. So how would you give someone advice about how to approach gaining mentors, gaining those skills? Like, where would you tell someone they needed to start?
So, you want to go? I'll go.
You go first, Amal.
Okay. I'll be very honest. When I came to America with my 2 suitcases, I was terrified. I was leaving my country. I was leaving everything I knew behind me to have an adventure. But I knew that it was such an amazing opportunity, that these opportunities don't come by every day, that I couldn't let this one go. So I packed my suitcases and I got on that plane and I cried as the plane took off. And I looked at England disappearing behind me and I was like, okay, let's do this. And I found people in Baltimore who nurtured me. And if I had people who presented themselves as Karen said earlier, opportunities come your way. You can choose to sort of ignore it in a way, or you can choose to embrace it. And I was fortunate enough to have a number of people who kind of took me under their wing almost. And so it was I terrified? Yes, absolutely paralyzed with fear. And I'm like, I can conquer the world. So it's how do you go about finding a mentor? I think you just have to be open to the possibility that they are there and open yourself up to the fact that there are many mentors out there for us all. They've presented themselves to me. I've actually never really gone out and looked for it.
I would say that too. I still have mentors. I still stay in touch with my PhD dissertation advisor. My first job, I to this day stay in contact with that mentor. I would say that there are mentors and there are champions. So a mentor is somebody that's with you day to day for a period of time in your career. They're really instructing you, but then there are champions, and champions are most likely going to be at the executive level. They're not going to have time to spend with you every day, but they're going to recognize your value. And when you need them, they'll champion for you. They're going to be there. I know Tracy Ann and I both love to mentor. So we're at a point, I had mentors say to me, if I mentor you correctly, I'll be working for you someday. And that's the approach that I take to mentoring people as well. As if I do my job right, they're gonna.
If we do our job right, they're gonna take our job.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's the good thing.
So where to start? I think hard work is always recognized, but also working smart. And don't hesitate to ask for feedback. One thing that we do a lot in science is give presentations. And for years, I would go to people after a presentation and say, please provide me honest feedback. Don't hold back. I want to be better. And I think giving presentations is something that you can always improve on. So I guess always continue to improve, work hard. It will get recognized. People see value. When you impact the business, it will be recognized.
Passion is recognized.
Mhm.
I see Anna shaking her head. I'm sure you've experienced the same.
Exactly. Well, it's interesting, and you were saying it's the mentors and the champions. I think that really resonated because as young girls are making their way into college and making decisions, they don't need to decide right away, but they do need to be listening and for constructive criticism, because the people that are hardest on us are sometimes the ones that are, those are the ones that make us grow, right? Those are the ones that are saying, you know, I'm going to give you the feedback so you can continue learning and maturing and getting to that level. And then hopefully you're finding a lot of those supports along the way. And they don't necessarily have to be just women, but it has, you know, I don't mean to say that, but it is important for the listening skills, which I think is really,
really I agree. I agree. I think it's interesting because it's when I was deciding, it's a little bit different in England than it is here in the United States. When you're making that decision, when you finish in high school and you're applying to go to college, there's a number of different avenues that you can take, and we have like community college type environments, and we have undergrad, we have universities, and we have polytechnics. Then it's changed a little bit now, but you picked one subject. And so it was really difficult for me to be able to pick a subject because I only had one. Here it's a little bit different because it's a bit more it's a bit more diverse when you do that next step. And I agonized over the decision about what I was going to do because I felt like I was going down this path and it was just that one path.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I finished that I realized, oh wait, I'm just on a science path. So both of our paths have kind of taken turns and gone, doubled back on themselves. Having that science background, having that ability to think critically, and Karen said this right at the beginning, it's an education that you get that teaches you how to think in all of these different aspects of STEM, no matter where you choose or where you go. These are the skills that you combine that with those soft skills, and you will have a successful career.
And you said that, Jai, you were saying that Tracy Ann and my path looked very similar, but I can tell you, for example, my college roommate got her degree in nursing and then went on to become a dentist. So the journeys can be, I have a nurse on my team that was a surgical nurse for a number of years and then led a field team for Merz, and now is in headquarters sitting in an office and flying to Europe. I mean, she keeps her nursing license up to date, but I mean, I'm sure when she started her nursing career, the last thing she thought she was going to be doing is
Jennifer, my clinops head is a nurse. Mm-hmm.
Well, and you say, I mean, Merz is in a unique space. What is the demand for jobs that you see in the aesthetics?
We have so many openings. Oh my gosh. Finding great people is there are great people out there, but we have so many openings that we have
Get the word out. I think that's important, right? I mean, I think that as girls start going into college and seeing the opportunities, they need to see it's not just being a doctor, being a lawyer, or being a nurse, or being a software developer. There are opportunities that these companies are so interesting. And
but it's strange because it's like we're in aesthetic medicine, which is a piece of medicine, but you don't go to college to study how to develop toxins for wrinkles and it is a unique part of industry that you can study in school, like clinical trial management, which you couldn't in my day, but you can now. But the cross-functional nature of what we do is not something that you're going to study specifically in school. It's just not, it doesn't exist. It's a unique market. And that's, I think, why it obviously attracts this very cross-functional group of scientists. And it's a very, very, very rapidly expanding business.
But you would be surprised, even for engineering. I mean, we have energy-based devices that we have engineers working at Merz Aesthetics.
We do. Yeah.
And there's so many different roles. I mean, we have a legal team, paralegals,
Patents is huge.
contracting. I mean, this business couldn't run if we didn't have people to do the contracts.
Yes. Yes.
Well, and you were saying you both worked at different size companies as well. What do you think are I mean, obviously there's big differences, but was it important for you to go to the smaller companies as well before coming to Merz? Because I found that in my personal journey being very important.
So I was at Allergan for 13 years, and then I was like the 38th employee hired at a startup. And Allergan was a fabulous company. It was a big company, a lot of infrastructure. And then going to the startup, one thing that I loved all the experiences that I had, but one thing about the startup was there were 38 people. Every idea was considered. Everybody, you know, everybody was at every meeting throwing out every idea. You were all making it happen. And I really got exposed to a lot of cross-functional experience in the smaller company that I might not have gotten at a larger company. So I can tell you, I think the question was asked, how do you make the decision to make a career move? Trust me, I agonized. I mean, 13 years at one company, it was a big move, but it was I grew a lot by making the change. I would say that.
I just realized I forgot 2 jobs that were on my hand, on my hand. I was like, oh, how did I forget? Maybe it's subliminal messaging. Yeah, I think that's the same. I probably would never have left the NIH if I hadn't had to leave. I would have stayed as an academic. But once I went to industry, I really, really enjoyed it. My mentor at the NIH kept telling me, don't stay, you're cut out for industry, go to industry. And so I did. And I've worked for I worked for a small Costa Rican company, which wasn't on my timeline. I forgot about that one. And I've worked for J&J and Allergan. Forgot J&J on there as well. And I will admit, for me, working in the Merz type environment in a smaller company is my preference. I like to be able to come down the stairs and, you know, look in Karen's office and know people on Karen's team and people in the commercial space. Walking around the Allergan campus, you know, I didn't even know 90% of the people that were there in the end. It got so big. It just is less personal and you feel less part of the process. You're just this little fish in a big pond as opposed to medium-sized pond and a medium-sized fish. So I think from my perspective, I prefer the smaller company, but it's good to have had that experience of the larger company, I think. So, yeah.
That's great.
Anyway. Any more questions? Do we have any more questions in the chat? I think so. No.
So Jaya, I know you're on mute. I think we're right about at time, but I would encourage anybody, if they have questions, we're always happy to talk to people or answer them.
Yep.
Are there, I was going to ask if there are any internships for college. I realize, you know, in like the summer jobs for college students, are there any opportunities that Merz offers?
Yes, there are. Yes, there are. We actually have a graduate program, but I know in the past we have had internships.
And Hiana, you may be able to comment a
Yeah.
little bit more on some of the internship programs that Merz has had throughout the years. I don't know if Hiana's still on.
I don't think, I think.
Okay.
She jumped on, but yes, we do, yes. And so I would encourage folks who are listening, who are on the phone, who even have questions for myself and Karen afterwards, or have questions about an internship program, to just reach out. You know, we're not scary, I don't think. And we're happy to offer any advice or input or help, or just if you want to bounce ideas off someone and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. What do you think? I know that you guys don't know us, but we'd be more than happy to help.
The network starts, right?
It does. It's hard though. It's
Right.
really hard to network. For me, it's really difficult. It's hard to talk to people that you don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to put your big girl panties on and get with it.
But, you know, to that comment, you know, we talk about going and talking to the doctors.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be on,
Yeah.
and I'll go to these congresses and I'll spend 2 or 3 hours. I once had somebody say, I think you talked to everybody in the room. You know, they were just watching. But then, you know, you can always go back into your room and pull out a book and, you know, don't be afraid. You know, and I do that, you know, you can
Balance.
turn it on when you have to turn it on, and then you
Yeah.
can, you know.
It's not easy for anyone. We make it be.
Introverts.
We're all scientists, you know, we're not necessarily the most extroverted people, and it takes a lot of energy to be extroverted when you need to be extroverted, and so we all need to kind of crawl under the covers at some point. And
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like my favorite meetings are when I can talk one-on-one with
Yeah.
people. I can go and talk to a physician all day long about science.
Mhm.
Put me up in front of
Yeah.
100 people and I'm gonna prepare for 50 hours and make sure it's gonna be.
And I
Well,
could
thank you all.
ask questions, but I think we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I could talk to you guys like for another hour. Lots of questions, but I'll curtail myself. And if there are no other questions, then thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful and fascinating, and learned
thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. Thank you to Merz Aesthetics for supporting the program. I think we will continue the conversations, and we'll share the presentation with the students in the program. Actually, we'll try to open it up to even more. So it's good.
Please do.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.